I mean, you have giant robots fighting giant monsters. How does that not sound awesome? I mean, I'm a simple man. I like explosions, I like action, and I like a cool story, so sounds like a good time to me, right? Hi, I'm Jacob Suggs, and welcome back to another episode of Totally Worth Watching. Basically, the concept behind the show is that I tell you a few reasons as to why I believe a show, movie, or whatever is well worth your time and is underrated by, the average consensus. Now, I'm not gonna lie, I saw Pacific Rim back in 2013 with my friends. We were about to go on a big trip, but we decided to hit up the theater and watch it before we left, and we were like, this is gonna be dumb, but it could be kind of fun, who knows? And if cinema of the past has taught us anything, it's that giant robots fighting giant monsters, or robots in general, those are typically pretty big box office heavy blockbusters, so the studio is probably not that concerned about critical, success. And I remember seeing the critical reviews for Pacific Rim whenever it was coming out, like on Rotten Tomatoes and IMDb and websites like that. And whenever it was getting positive reviews, it kind of baffled me a little bit because I guess I was expecting it to be crap. I mean, I'm not joking. Literally the only reason why I had hope for this movie is because Guillermo del Toro, the director of Hellboy and Pan's Labyrinth and other movies that I like, was helming the camera this time, and I trust him enough with a film. Long story short, I thought the movie was going to be fun, but fun doesn't necessarily mean good. I've seen plenty of fun movies that absolutely suck. And I remember the first thing that I told my friends after seeing the movie was, well, that was pretty awesome. I mean, the story was good, the characters are great, but about 5 minutes later, of course, we're talking about the action and how well shot it was, which we're gonna get into that a little bit later. But honestly, the more I think of Pacific Rim, the more I tend to enjoy it. See, on the surface, it looks like this generic monster versus robots movie, but there's so much more to it than that. The characters in the film aren't flat, and the plot actually kind of has a lot of interesting ideas and has a lot of sense behind it, so it's not just mindless action. And whenever you combine those two ideas, great action all with a sense of emotion and reasons as to why we should care about what's happening, then you actually get a pretty solid film. Now, one of the reasons that I appreciate Guillermo del Toro a lot as a director and as a filmmaker is because his creature design is always spot on. Most notably, this is seen in Pan's Labyrinth and a little bit in the Hellboy films, but each kaiju monster in Pacific Rim feels unique. The designs are very distinctive, and you can kind of tell what their powers and abilities are based on how they look, and you can definitely tell, they stand out even when they're fighting in, stormy weather in the middle of the ocean. And in this case, Guillermo del Toro also does a fantastic job of utilizing design and creativity and ingenuity for the Jaeger side, or human side of things as well. Each Jaeger stands out. Gypsy Danger is the blue one. I know that the red one has 4 arms. Each one has different powers and weapons. It's easy to spot out, unlike something like Transformers. I bring up Transformers only because it deals with the giant robot aspect of things again, and in those movies, it's very hard for me to distinguish, during the action scenes, who's an Autobot and who's a Decepticon. The colors just don't mesh well for me. And before you hate on me for that comment, I understand that yes, this is robots versus monsters. You kind of know which one you're rooting for, but at the same time, they've got to have distinctive designs, or else it's just going to be a bunch of mishmash giant material that we can barely see fighting in the middle of the ocean. In short, the designs in the film are spot on. You can tell what is what, and you can distinguish the good from the bad without much thought. But honestly, I think that the best thing about the Jaegers are how they're piloted, not the weaponry or how awesome the action is when they fight. Jaegers require 2 pilots, resulting in their minds being connected in order to pilot them, and this is where the majority of the emotional conflict and character development kind of comes into play with the characters. Because when your minds are connected, you share memories and stuff that's happened in the past and how you're feeling emotionally, and that also hits another person because you're basically transferring memories. This is demonstrated perfectly later on in the film with Mako and Riley, but I don't want to get too much into spoilers because I actually want you to watch this movie because it's pretty great. Fact of the matter is that I thought it was a really interesting concept and idea that we really haven't seen, but it makes sense because to pilot something that big, you may need two minds, and two minds are better than one, am I right? I also want to mention that the CGI is also pretty impressive, so you aren't taken out of the experience watching the film thinking that something isn't there because it was made in a computer and rendered and just edited in later. The action in the film is extremely well shot. It's not shot really close up and the camera's like shaking every 5 minutes. You can actually see every punch, making each punch make a bigger impact whenever it happens on the screen. Throughout the entire film, 100% serious, I was sure there was a robot punching a giant monster in the face. And all jokes aside, the film appears very, very real, and there isn't a moment where you're really questioning the CG in the film because it's just meshing together so well with the story. Now, one of the biggest themes in Pacific Rim is stepping up to bat once we've fallen and failed in a certain aspect before. The protagonist, Riley, has lost all of his sense of self-worth and determination, and so the film kind of plays the classic David and Goliath story, but with monsters and robots instead. The unfortunate reality is that when people think of Pacific Rim, they think of the action scenes and the giant robots and the monsters, but in reality, this movie is about character development and growth and finding yourself again. Stuff like that. We've seen the David and Goliath story done numerous times in films, books, games, other media, but we haven't quite seen it like this, or at least before the time there's very minimal kind of like stuff like that. Aside from like anime and Japanese culture, it wasn't super duper Americanized. Now, before I end this video, there's one more thing I want to talk about, and that's Idris Elba in this movie. He's kind of fantastic, and I don't want to say much about his character in the film, but all you really need to know is that this dude, hands down, gives the best movie fight speech, I've ever seen since the first Independence Day, and that's saying a lot. Now, I'm not going to lie to you guys, this movie does have some problems. It certainly isn't perfect. But ultimately, the strong characters and development showcased in the film helps triumph over these problems with a giant Jaeger smack to the face. That all being said, and although I've given this movie a ton of praise already and given you plenty of reasons to check it out, there is one moment in the movie to where you wonder, if they had that, why didn't they use that prior? Because it was pretty effective here. So why wouldn't you use it there or before? I mean, you could have solved this whole situation a lot faster, much easier. I don't know, it just makes me think, because I'm like, if you had it, you should have used it, but I mean, it wouldn't have made for an interesting story. It would have just been like 3 minutes, basically. If you've seen the movie, you know exactly what I'm talking about. If you haven't seen the movie, once you watch the movie, you're gonna know exactly what I'm talking about. So what do you think of Pacific Rim? Do you love it? Do you hate it? Let me know down in the comments below. I really do love reading the comments. And as always, please like, comment, and subscribe. I'm Frame by Frame, remember the name, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye guys.